Okay, welcome to this weekly. For this weekly, I would like to review the properties that we've learned about. We'll start with the commutative property for addition and for multiplication. So when you're looking at the commutative property, you'll have the same, in this case, letters. You could have the same numbers, and everything's going to revolve around either addition. In this case, you'll notice that the A and the B switch places, and the B is now first and the A is second. Or it will revolve around multiplication. A and B will all switch places just right around the multiplication. Okay, so there's no parentheses involved with commutative properties for addition or for multiplication. Now when you look for the associative properties are when you're going to be dealing with parentheses, and they're really grouping things differently. So right now you'll see this is all for addition. The A and the B are grouped together. Still the same letters, but now we're grouping the B and the C together. Okay, so you can think of these as these parentheses as shifting, and the same thing will happen with multiplication. If you have A times B, they're grouping the A and the B together here. Now we're going to group the B with the C. Still multiplication, but the parentheses have shifted. All right, let's look at the distributive property. And so what we have here is distributive property right here, where we have A times B, A times C, and you'll get AB, and you'll get AC. Okay. Now you can also go in reverse of this. You can have the A times the B for your BA, and your A times C for your CA or AC. Okay. And the same holds for subtraction as well. So you're going to be looking for your, this should be subtraction here. Same thing. A times B is AB, A times C is AC, and we're simply subtracting here. Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll look at the addition property of equality and the multiplication property of equality, and all you need to do here is just think about the idea of what you do to one side, you do to the other. So if you add something to one side of an equation, let's say, you're going to add the same thing to the other side of the equation. Same thing's going to happen with multiplication. If you multiply the one side of an equation by a number, you have to multiply the other side by the same number. Okay, and that's why we have the word equality in here, because both sides are treated the same. Okay, now let's look at identity. Think of this in terms of what gets you back to what you started with. So the identity element is always associated with an operation. So the identity element for a given operation is the element that preserves the identity of other elements under the given operation. So for addition, let's say, what's the identity element for addition? Well, it's going to be 0, because if I add 0 to anything, it gets me back to what I started with. So if I start with A, add 0 to it, I still have A. The same thing is true right here. You'll just see that they've switched the direction of the 0 and the A. Okay, so right here it says the number 0 does not change the value of other numbers under addition. Now for multiplication, the identity element will change. The identity element for multiplication is the number 1, because, let's say I start with A again. If I multiply by 1, I still have A. Okay, the only difference here that I just underlined is that the A and the 1 have switched places. Okay, so the number 1 does not change the value of other numbers under multiplication. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give you a few questions. I'm going to ask you to try your best to identify what you are seeing, if it's the addition property of equality, associative property for addition, multiplication, and so on. So please stay tuned for the questions that follow. Okay, let's look at this next example. This example is about the addition property of equality, and the directions say identify the properties being shown. So you'll see you have an equation here, 4x minus 9 equals 2x plus 8. And what's happening here is we are adding 9 here to both sides. Okay, and what is done to one side is done to the other, and so it says select one or more correct answers. Well, I told you at the beginning here that this is the addition property of equality, and so I would circle that choice there. It's not the subtraction property of equality, because obviously we're not subtracting things, we're adding the same thing to both sides. and it's not the commutative property because, as you notice here, everything is in the same order. Nothing has changed orders. And it's not the associative property because we don't have any parentheses where things have been grouped up differently. No parentheses shifted from one group to another. So that takes care of this example. Please stay tuned for the question that follows. Okay, so this next example, we have an equation. It says when solving 3 times the quantity x plus 5 minus 4 equals 2x plus 9, we would use the following steps. And these are all listed out line by line. So line 1 says we have our equation that we started with. Line 2, you'll notice that the parentheses are gone, and the x has become 3x, and the 5 has become a 15. Nothing else has changed here. So it looks like what we did was distribute. Okay, so that looks like distribution that happened from line 1 to 2. Now, the difference from line 2 to 3 is that we are now looking at, instead of a 15 and a negative 4, we're looking at an 11. And everything else remains the same. So from line, from line 2 to 3, it looks like we've just combined like terms. All right. And from line 1 to 2, we said distributive property. Okay, from line 3 to 4, it looks like the only thing that is different is the 11 has been moved over. I would subtract the 11. 9 minus 11 would give us our negative 2. And so I think that's what we would say is the subtraction property of equality. And then from lines, from lines 4 to 5, it looks like what we've done is we have subtracted 2x. So 3x minus 2x is 1x, and the negative 2 stays. And so, again, that would be the subtraction property of equality. All right, so the question says, which of the following properties are used to go from lines 3 to 4? And I think what we said was the subtraction property of equality. And so of all of our choices, some of these were used, but I am going to go with the subtraction property of equality. So that does it for this example. Please stay tuned for the question that follows. Okay, on this next example, it says fill in the blanks of this proof showing that the quantity a plus 10 times the quantity a plus 3 is equivalent to a squared plus 13a plus 30. Write either commutative property or associative property or distributive property in the blank. Going from line 2 to line 3. So I've actually filled in all of these but one, and this could be an opportunity for you to just review what was done to go from line to line. But we're going to look at line 2 to line 3. So we're really focusing right here, from here to here. So what was happening? What's the difference, I guess? This was what we should focus on, and I really think this right here is where we need to look. And now that starts out as the quantity a plus 10 times 3. But then what you notice down here is it's 3 times the quantity a plus 10. And so I think what's happening here is the grouping symbols have not changed. The parentheses are not different. I think what has changed, though, is the order. The 3 has changed places with the quantity a plus 10. So it doesn't look like this is associative property because, again, things are grouped the same. Parentheses are grouped the same. Nothing was distributed. Okay, the 3 is not distributed to the a plus 10. So I think what we're looking at here is the commutative property. And I think, to be specific, this is based on multiplication. So we would say for multiplication. So that takes care of this question. Please stay tuned for the question that follows.